Good morning, everybody. The stunning weather continues, and England cricket fans can't believe we've managed to beat India in the first Test match. So it's all good news. Until, of course, you talk about Brexit, which won't go away even in the dog days of August. And this morning, Liam Fox saying he now thinks there's a 60-40 chance of a no-deal Brexit. And this morning, I want to ask you, do you now think that a no-deal Brexit is a reality? And if you think, yep, we're going to crash out, we're going to fall over the edge of a cliff, it's going to be a disaster, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or actually, you may say, do you know what? This is the best thing that could happen. The Chequers deal was a disaster. It was Brexit in name only. Let's just get out and start our lives all over again. If that's how you feel, text to 84850. Or maybe you think, actually, with the right leadership, a deal may still very well be possible. And if that's how you feel, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Now, earlier on this morning, I spoke to Stuart Jackson, the former Tory Member of Parliament for Peterborough and one of David Davis's most senior aides in the Brexit department. I started by asking Stuart whether post-Chequers he himself had wanted to stay in the job or had considered walking out.
My position was that I was happy to continue to serve. I always assumed that when David went, I would go, because we'd worked very closely together, both when I was his parliamentary private secretary and in 9 Downing Street when I was his chief of staff. But I was asked by his successor, Dominic Raab, to continue.
Yeah.
I had some qualms about that because I wasn't happy with Chequers, to say the least. I thought Chequers was an abject capitulation. I wasn't happy with the downgrading of the role of the department to be effectively a civil contingency mini department and all the negotiating arms stripped out and placed in 10 Downing Street in the Europe unit.
Was that downgrading
continue?
Was that downgrading clear to Dominic Raab when he accepted the post, in your opinion?
I think there had been some media speculation that it would happen. I think it was part of the sort of what I've called the silent coup d'etat that culminated on the 6th of July with the Chequers Accord. That part of the deal would be that there would be a land grab by the number 10 Europe unit to take all the negotiating resource in-house and downgrade the department. So in answer to your question, I was willing to continue. He asked me to, but I would have found it difficult, if I'm honest, to do so because of the changed status of the department. And obviously it was academic because it was blocked by number 10 who said that they didn't want me on the premises. So I went different ways.
I mean, you're a Brexiteer, Stuart. You and I shared platforms together in the referendum campaign.
Yeah.
Who in number 10 is driving the strategy? Who in number 10 is the person that says, that Jackson chap, we're blackballing him?
Well, I'm reluctant to name names without evidence, but clearly I didn't always see eye to eye with the Director of Communications, Robbie Gibb, and with Gavin Barwell, the Chief of Staff. And obviously, in terms of the wider political context, and that incidentally was because I was loyal and defended my boss, and what we've seen actually is a sort of slow motion constitutional outrage, because what they did by subterfuge in number 10, not just those individuals but the whole machine, is to get to a position where you had a policy which no one had supported or voted for, which is obviously the Chequers capitulation. And I think on the wider issue is, of course, the senior civil servants who've never reconciled themselves to the fact that the British people have decided that we're leaving the European Union, and the electorate have decided they'll support parties that will give effect to that. And, of course, the sort of deep state senior civil service cannot cope with that and wish to thwart it.
So Mrs May is surrounded in Downing Street by people who do not want a clean Brexit to happen. Do you have any thought as to what her mind is on Brexit now?
Well, it's difficult to know because you judge people...
Isn't it?
You judge people by their actions and their words. Her words have been pretty fixed and unequivocal. So at Lancaster House, he did outline a very positive, forward-looking and ambitious plan for a free trade agreement, and all that entailed, what we called a Canada Plus, and that's what we were working on. She reiterated that in Mansion House. She campaigned on that in the general election, and she frequently mentioned it in the House of Commons. That said, what we got was this sort of half Brexit in name only, with a common rule book, continuing ECJ jurisdiction, no deal for services, this crazy customs partnership, which is not going to be accepted by the EU and certainly not by many people in the Commons. And of course, we're going to have to pay a bill of up to £40 billion for the privilege. So what she said and what she's actually come up with are completely different things.
Do you think she secretly really wants us to remain in the European Union in everything but name?
Well, I've described her before as like a woman that's taken home a rather awkward IKEA cabinet, and she's exasperated she can't put it together. And that's her sort of attitude to Brexit. It's a problem that she needs to solve. And you need, a bureaucratic, mechanistic mindset like hers to sort of solve the problem. And in some respects, of course, she's very... She can be, on one hand, quite obdurate, but she's very focused, she's very committed to public service, she's very resilient, and I think you do need that skill set. But you also need someone who's absolutely positive, has vision, belief, and in principle supports Brexit. And I very much doubt whether she's in that category.
Yeah. I mean, in effect, with what she's done at Lancaster House, as you say, laying out a vision for Brexit that Stuart had me cheering her words on this LBC radio station, with the manifesto that she produced and asked people to vote for, and now given what she's done, is Mrs May betraying Brexit voters?
Well, I think a lot of Conservative supporters are very angry. I don't think the parliamentary party in Parliament knew, probably until they got back to their constituencies, and they're probably not there now, they're on holiday, which is fair enough. But when they actually come back from holiday at the end of this month and early September, I think they will see the sort of Alex Ferguson-style hairdryer treatment that they're going to get from senior people in their party, people on whom they rely to get elected. And those people in marginal seats with majorities under, say, 5,000 or 6,000 are going to clearly understand that if those people go on strike, or they shift to a potentially rejuvenated UKIP, which could happen, then the Conservative Party is in very serious bother. And were it not for the appalling leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, if the Labour Party had a decent leader of the likes of Blair circa 1994, the Conservatives would be 10 or 15% behind the polls at least.
But let me ask you, Stuart.
That is the position for Conservatives.
But what do you think?
That is the decision they've got to take.
But what do you think? Do you think, effectively, Chequers is a betrayal of the Brexit vote?
Yes, I do. I can't be equivocating on it. I don't think it's what people voted for. We voted absolutely to take back control of our money, our laws and our borders, and Chequers is about as bad a deal as you can get. It backed us in where we were a year or so ago. We were ready to go on legal text for the backstop for the Irish border. We were ready to go with more technical negotiations, an ambitious white paper, a free trade agreement. In fact, Donald Tusk, as you know, Nigel, accepted the premise of a free trade agreement in March.
I know.
And we should have then moved forward. What we've done, we've backed ourselves into this terrible cul-de-sac, which says it's no deal or this half Brexit, and it's disastrous.
Now, Liam Fox today has been talking about Monsieur Barnier's recent intransigence, and you're right, some like Donald Tusk have been more reasonable, but Monsieur Barnier has not been reasonable, in my opinion, at any point during this. Fox seems to say that a no-deal Brexit is now becoming almost a probability. Do you think a no-deal Brexit is now on the cards?
I think there's a 40% chance now of a no-deal Brexit, or as I prefer to call it, a WTO Brexit.
Yeah.
Because what we mustn't do is fall into the hands or the language of the extremist Remainers who try and look for everything to the disadvantage of the United Kingdom over Brexit and exacerbate that. It's a fact that scores of countries across the world trade on WTO terms. Very successful, competitive, growing economies do. And, you know, I've looked at the no-deal scenarios. I was at the inter-ministerial groups pretty much every other week, looking at the impact of what might happen and the contingency planning. There's a lot of rhetoric and nonsense about it. Yes, I mean, it might be a bit fractious and difficult for a year or so, but let's be honest, you know, third-party actions you cannot mitigate. You cannot have a contingency. If the French decide to be exceptionally difficult in checking passports, in checking every pallet and every lorry and every van,
but they'd be in breach of their own treaties. I mean, their own treaties talk about behaving well with neighbours, and Stuart, they could behave like that, I suppose. But I actually rather doubt it. I think French commercial interests would force them not to. But you're right, they could. They could. I don't think any of us quite know this autumn where this is going,
No.
And there could be a very, very big crisis at some point. But let me ask about you, because the current MP for Peterborough has some legal difficulties at the moment. There is potentially going to be a by-election in Peterborough. I understand if that happens that you won't be standing again.
That's true, Nigel, yes.
And so why? Has life in Parliament sort of dismayed you so much?
No, I've fought the Peterborough constituency 5 times in the last 17 years, won 3 and lost 2. I had a good run, but I do feel it's now time for someone else to carry the banner forward and try and win the seat. Obviously, I was very disappointed to lose. I didn't expect to lose, like many Conservatives. 33 of us lost our seats in the general election last year. It was, I made it quite clear, and it's not a secret, I thought it was a lamentable campaign, and it shouldn't have happened. But you have to respect the people's decision, and for me, I've given it my best shot. Having said that, also, I would find it very difficult to go on the doorsteps to praise the Chequers agreement as the most optimal agreement that the Prime Minister can come up with in presenting to the European Union, and on that basis I think it's better that someone else goes forward as a candidate. I will be supporting them, obviously, as President of Peterborough Conservatives.
Well, that was Stuart Jackson, former Tory MP for Peterborough, and of course very senior aide to David Davis, using very strong language, describing Chequers as an abject capitulation. And when I asked him, is the Prime Minister betraying Brexit voters, the answer was yes. Strong stuff. Now, there could be a by-election in Peterborough. We don't yet know. The local MP is in some legal difficulties. He said he would not stand in that by-election because he could not stand, basically, for the Conservative Party on its current Brexit trajectory. But I was astonished this morning. Turned over the newspaper, got to page 2 of the Sunday Times. There's a big headline: Farage eyes pro-Brexit seat in bid to become MP. Apparently, I've been discussing with close colleagues the prospect of me standing in the Peterborough by-election if it comes along at some point this summer. I'm going to tell you whether that is true or false. But for now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 19 minutes past 10. So according to Caroline Wheeler, the deputy political editor of the Sunday Times, I am eyeing up the pro-Brexit constituency of Peterborough, and if there is a by-election, I may well stand, according to sources close to Mr. Farage. Well, all I can say, Caroline Wheeler, I don't know who your sources are, but you got the wrong ones. You could have always phoned me if you'd wanted to. I suppose it's a good story and it's a bit of fun, but it's completely and utterly untrue. In fact, Donald would call it fake news. OK, moving on. Are we headed for a no-deal Brexit? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What does no deal actually mean? Can I just be clear about one thing from a Brexit perspective? We voted for independence, not for a backroom deal done with Monsieur Barnier. And there is no deal with Monsieur Barnier, if dictated by him, that would allow us to break free of the European Union's rule book. This is what he believes in. Remember, folks, I went and sat with him for an hour on the 8th of January this year, just to get completely clear where his mind was. Whether we're in the European Union or out of the European Union, the one thing he's absolutely determined to do is to make sure we're not allowed to have a different set of rules, what I would call a competitive advantage. Do I want a deal? I want a WTO deal. You know, if the European Union are not prepared, and let's have one last go. Let's have one last go. Let's go to them and say, look, we've wasted our time, frankly, for the last couple of years. We're getting nowhere with this. We're quite happy to have a Canada-style free trade deal with you. After all, they're offering one to America at the moment. They've done one with Canada. The American one could even include financial services. So they'll do trade deals with other people around the world, just not with us, despite the fact they sell us nearly £100 billion of the goods every year more than we sell them, despite the fact they call us Treasure Island, because there are 5.5 million jobs in Europe directly linked to selling goods into this country. We have an incredibly strong negotiating position, if only we recognise it. So let's have one last go. Let's say, right, let's have a Canada-style trade agreement. Let's get it sorted out in the next 10 weeks. Let's all know where we are. If you're not prepared to even countenance that, then we will be leaving on the 29th of March next year at 11 p.m. UK time, and we will have a WTO deal. What does that mean? This use of the word no deal is misleading. It's language dictated by Remainers to make us feel like we'll be falling off the edge of a cliff. We won't. There are internationally accepted rules under the World Trade Organization for doing business, and yes, with our neighbours, of course. We've got to sort out healthcare. We've got to sort out how aeroplanes land in each other's countries. We've got to do things that any normal set of neighbours would do and do all around the world. It is not beyond the wit of man. It is not difficult. But I just feel that the whole Brexit debate has moved. We voted to leave the European Union. We voted to be free, to take back control of our money, our laws, our borders, and we're bogged down discussing the details of a deal, which the establishment tell us, if we don't stay pretty much as we are, will be a disaster. How do you feel? How does Margaret, a new caller to this show from New Ash Green in Kent, feel? Good morning, Margaret.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. I'm frustrated with Brexit. I mean, goodness gracious me. But other than that, I'm loving the weather and trying to enjoy the summer, Margaret. What about you?
Jolly good, exactly the same.
Good.
My question would be to Theresa May, Miss Kittenhills as I call her.
Right.
Why on earth was there not preparation done from the very beginning for no deal? I mean, with all these checkers...
Yeah.
Yeah, an awful lot of sense. And some...
Margaret, that line's rubbish. I'm going to get you back on the line. Simon is calling from Basingstoke. Good morning, Simon.
Yes, good morning, Nigel. I think we're looking at this too negatively, because I think, given how compliant Theresa May has been, I think she has proved definitively that there is no deal to be done with Europe. Basically, every red line she's described, she's allowed. She's given concessions to the European Union and said, "Okay, we'll do what you want to do," and they still don't want to make a deal. So I think what we need to do is we need to make it clear that we're done negotiating, and that we will leave on WTO rules. And there are huge benefits to us if we do that. That the recent Amazon's corporation tax scandal, the day we leave, we can end the tax treaty with Luxembourg.
Simon, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? Never once do I hear those in favour of remaining in the European Union ever make the argument that it's because of the European Economic Area tax rules that any company can choose to pay corporation tax in whatever country it wants. And you're right, Simon. Leaving would give us back tax sovereignty, and we could start charging Amazon more money, couldn't we?
We could, and also we would be collecting the WTO tariffs, the EU tariffs on non-EU country imports. We currently send 80% of that to the European Union. So, and I think you should raise that. Next time someone accuses you of overestimating the amount of money we sent to Europe, in fact, you didn't. You underestimated.
OK, no, I get the point. Simon, thank you. And Simon there is not scared of the WTO option. Rob from Bolney says, we voted to leave the EU. No deal is right up my street. Get on with it. Peter in Lansing says, does no deal mean no divorce settlement? By which he's talking, of course, about the £40 billion that for some reason Theresa May has promised to the European Union. There are better things we can spend our money on. Paul is a new caller from Northwich in Cheshire. Good morning, Paul.
Hi, Nigel.
So, is no deal a realistic possibility in your view?
No.
OK, explain why.
Well, Theresa May's got no intention of leaving the EU. I mean, the cabinet now is the most pro-Remain cabinet you could possibly have. And what's the purpose of staying in the EU? It's collapsing anyway.
Well, it's certainly got its problems, Paul. But we've, when you hear Liam Fox saying there could be a no deal, do you think he is truly representing the Prime Minister's mind, or this is all just a front, and actually they're going to cave in further in the autumn?
I couldn't see it not being a front, because there's no will there to leave the EU.
No, Paul, you've made that point with great clarity. And Paul is right. The Prime Minister doesn't believe in Brexit. She can't even say today she believes in Brexit. I do not believe that with Mrs May as Prime Minister that we will leave the European Union on WTO rules. I think Barnier will make things harder and harder for us. And I think if Stuart Jackson, former MP for Peterborough and aide to David Davis, if he described what happened at Chequers as an abject capitulation, my view is, all the while she's Prime Minister, you ain't seen nothing yet. There's going to be an even bigger surrender at some point in September or October. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 10:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. A no deal with the European Union becoming more likely. Is it realistic? Could it actually happen? Tina says, May has been saved by the summer recess. I bet she's using this time to tie us further into the EU. Well, I'll tell you where she has been. She's been to meet President Macron. And they had a 5-course dinner and they were there at his summer retreat. It all looked really rather lovely, and I've no doubt being in the south of France was nice, although even hotter, of course, than it is here. If she thought that Monsieur Macron was going to break away from the Barnier doctrine and start looking to negotiate separately with the United Kingdom, she got it completely wrong. As Lord Ricketts, our former French ambassador, said, Macron was the last person to want to break ranks. And I think Ricketts is absolutely right. If she seriously wanted to try and split the European Union, she'd have gone to Rome. She'd have gone to meet the Italian government. If she wants some introductions, I can certainly help her, because they strongly want just a sensible free trade deal with the United Kingdom. The Italian economy is very, very weak, and they're worried. They're worried about losing access to our markets. Barnes says the UK must leave the EU with no deal. Any ties at all will lead to us being drawn back in the future. Well, that's certainly the Brexit I voted for, one where we're free to do our own thing. We're making a terrible hash of it. Is it too late for a sensible trade deal of some kind to be done? One that we put on the table and say to them, take it or leave it. Mark is a new caller from Halifax. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you? All right.
Do you think it's possible, under Mrs May's leadership, that there could be a no-deal Brexit?
I believe that there should be a no-deal Brexit. We've gone past... Basically, we are called Great Britain. We were called Great Britain. And now we're a lapdog state of Europe. And basically, we can get a deal with Europe. I do believe we can, if we take the deal what Europe wants, not what we want, what's best for this country. Mm-hmm. There was a referendum, and it was voted to come out of Europe, and we should be doing that. The problem is we're not fighting enough. We won 2 world wars, and at the end of the day, we have got it in us. And, Europe need us, actually, as more as we need Europe. If you had somebody like Trump doing the deal...
Well,
He does deals. He goes around the world.
Isn't it remarkable, Mark? Isn't it remarkable that Trump talks tough about Europe, says I'm going to put tariffs on. The German car industry goes into a state of blind panic, as does much of the rest of European manufacturing. Before you know it, they've chucked Mr. Juncker on a plane, he's gone off to meet the president, and it ends up with a little press meeting where they say we're going to aim ultimately for zero tariffs. Trump has shown us, Mark, that it can be done.
Yes, yeah, and that's the problem. I just believe that Europe think that we'll just back down, and that where we are behaving, I think it's a high possibility. But if at the end of the day, politicians, as what you well know, are not always liked. That's okay. That's great. But you've got to have belief in them. I'm a Margaret Thatcher fan. You know what I mean? Like her or loathe her. That's your choice or anybody else's.
At least you knew where you stood. Yeah, no, Mark, Mark, I get that. I get that. Moving on. Thank you very much indeed. Steve from Aylesbury's got a tongue-in-cheek suggestion. Serious situation. Let's get in the UK's renowned expert on who's used to dealing with this exact situation, Noel Edmonds. Thank you, Steve. If the WTO was bad, the world wouldn't use it, says Sean from Tolworth. Ian says, Nigel, what deal would you actually seek? Ian, one last attempt. Let's not have them dictating to us. We have got a very, very strong hand here. Let's say to them, right, you sell us an awful lot of stuff. It's great for you, but we do actually believe overall in free trade between countries that are relative equals. Here is a Canada-style deal. Can we talk about doing this before the end of this year? If not, we're not going to waste our time anymore. This civil servants Brexit, this negotiation between you and Ollie Robbins is ended. We're now going to have a people's Brexit. And if you don't want a grown-up deal, that's absolutely fine by us. We will leave on the 29th of March next year with a WTO deal. The deal is we get a WTO rules and we sort out our neighbourly disputes well ahead of time. That, Ian, is what I now want. I don't want anything to do with that Chequers plan. It's not me saying it. Stuart Jackson said it is a betrayal, and that's exactly, if you're one of the 17.4 million people out there that voted Brexit, that is exactly what Chequers is, I'm sorry to say. Simon is a new caller from Sidcup. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm just tearing my hair out with this Prime Minister who says one thing and does another. But, Simon, is a no-deal realistic? It isn't really realistic with this cabinet, is it?
No, the deal's already been done. This meeting up with Merkel and Macron, the deal's already done. There's no negotiation going on, I don't think. The Chequers deal was run up the flag a couple of weeks ago. Everyone, Remainers, Leavers, the lot, was against it. She's going to go out there now and retrieve it and then run it up as a victory. So, this is just talk. I mean, I saw this morning that Gove's come out and said, there's going to be a no deal, and a few of the others are saying it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, are they saying it because they realise that post-Chequers, a deal which Michael Gove appeared to support enthusiastically, are they saying it because they fear that unless they talk about the prospect of a no deal, that half the Conservative Party is just going to abandon them, desert them, or shout at them in the street, as a youngster did to Michael Gove, accusing him of betrayal? Are they not doing this for party unity, rather than sincerely any one of them believing that Mrs May would go for a no-deal Brexit?
I just don't understand how any of them are not listening to what everyone, virtually everyone, apart from the trendy lefties, is saying, we'd rather have a no deal than this half-cocked Chequers deal. But nothing's getting through. I mean, she could win the election tomorrow.
Corbyn, of course, has got significant problems, and it's very interesting that Vince Cable appears to have been in quite advanced talks with some Labour figures. Is there a new SDP type party, Simon, perhaps coming along because Corbyn is seen to be too extreme? Don't know. We'll discuss that from 11 o'clock this morning. Simon, you're happy with a no deal, but I do not believe the Prime Minister or the Cabinet or Parliament would be. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Gary says, sack May now. No deal is the best deal. Well, no deal is better than a bad deal. But please, someone, come and tell me that leaving on WTO terms with neighbourly agreements, come on and tell me why you think that would be a disaster. Because it would it not, be honouring the Brexit vote? Graham is a new caller from Worcester. Good morning, Graham.
Good morning, Nigel. And first of all, can I thank you for getting us to the point where we've actually got a Brexit?
Well, that's kind of you, Graham. It wasn't just me, I can assure you. But you know, we're headed for Brexit in name only, Graham. I'm pretty upset and angry.
So am I, Nigel. We had a referendum. We had that £9 million leaflet go out before.
Yep.
Everybody knew exactly what we were voting for, even though they keep telling us we didn't. And the overwhelming vote was to leave. Now, from day one, we were told that a no deal is better than a bad deal. May has come out of Chequers saying that nobody's going to get everything they want. Well, that's appeasement to the Remain side. The Remain side lost. They did not win this argument, they lost.
Well, I tell you what, Graham, they're winning the argument at the moment.
Well, they are, because we've got a Remain, they're running the government. But at the end of the day, Nigel, we've got to stand firm, and we've got to say, no, we're going on WTO. These people do not want to deal with us. It's quite obvious of that, and they're making it so difficult, and the reason they're doing that is because they're frightened that so many are going to follow suit. Because once they see us doing so well, they're going to desert it like rats leaving a sinking ship.
We have to be punished. We can talk about no tariffs on all manufactured goods with America, do a deal with Canada, but we can't do it with the UK. No, Graham, their motivations in this are highly political. Graham, I thank you for your call. Well, lots of you saying you're not bothered by a no deal. I want to hear from the other side of the argument. I want to hear why you are concerned about a no deal. But look, folks, however much some of you contacted me this morning want a no deal, I do not think we're headed for a no deal. I don't. I think these comments by Fox and Gove are a desperate attempt to keep a party together that is on the verge, I think, certainly in the country, of blowing apart. That's how I see it. I mean, goodness me, look at the reaction we've had on LBC from Conservative supporters to the Chequers deal. Look at the Daily Telegraph letters page. Thousands of letters they've been getting every single day on this. Unprecedented, even for them. So, I just do not think that a no-deal Brexit with this government and this cabinet is realistic. I think this is just this debate that's happening this weekend is just a stepping stone to a really, really huge, humiliating, embarrassing surrender that is coming this autumn. That is my prediction. I wish I could be cheerier on this Sunday morning, but frankly, with the people we've got running this country, I'm not. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 10:45. Is a no deal now a possibility, as some cabinet ministers are beginning to suggest? I don't think it is a possibility with this government. Some of you so far have said you're quite happy with a no deal. You voted for us to leave, and let's just leave. And in many ways, you're right. However, there has to be a deal of some kind, folks. You know, there has to be a deal because we're next door neighbours with these people, regardless whether we're in their political union or not. What I don't want is the kind of deal Monsieur Barnier appears to want to have with us, and Mrs May went pretty close at Chequers to agreeing. But not everybody agrees. Paul says to me on Facebook, you've put us on collision course of a no deal. Well, I'm it doesn't have to be a collision, does it? You know, just a good neighbourly agreement. We move on with WTO rules, and there are some advantages to doing that. There are some disadvantages too. Of course there are. There always are. You've got to weigh up one against the other. Another Paul on Facebook says, you have destroyed our country, Farage. Well, thank you, Paul. I haven't destroyed it. I've tried to make it a proper country. Do you know something, Paul? Proper countries make their own laws, control their own borders. That's what countries are. Proper countries don't let a bunch of old men in Brussels that you can't vote for and can't remove make all the rules. I just want us to be a normal, proper, self-governing nation that gets on with its European neighbours. If you think that's destroyed the country, of course you're free to think that. But I would like to think, Paul, I want to make it a proper country. Let's go to Sam, a new caller from Liverpool. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. So is no deal now realistic, as Liam Fox seems to suggest?
I think it's it's realistic, but it's also potentially totally calamitous.
Calamitous, yeah.
Yes. I was hoping I might be able to persuade you to have a debate with one of your colleagues. I'm sure he's a friend of yours, despite your difference in views. But, I hope he's a friend of yours. Because he's also, and I think you're a very intelligent man, but I think also James O'Brien is also very clued up on these things, just as yourself. I know he has exactly the opposite view, but I think that he'd be much better than myself at explaining why.
Well, Sam, he has 3 hours every day where he can put his view, or 5 days a week, and he does do that. There's no question about that.
Yeah, no.
He sometimes doesn't appear to have that much respect for people with different arguments, but hey, we all do things differently. Sam, you think that a WTO trading rule deal could be calamitous for the country? And listen, the floor is yours. Tell me why, in your own words, you think that would be calamitous.
I think that we would lose hundreds of thousands of jobs. We would lose inward investment because most companies that invest here want EU-style access to the EU market, to the 500 million people, and.
OK, well, Sam, I tell you what, you've just made two very big points, all right? You've said it could cost hundreds of thousands of jobs and that it could kill inward investment. 20 years ago, Sam, did you support us joining the euro?
I think that's a bit of a red herring.
Well, I tell you what, no. Let me tell you why I ask you that. Let me tell you why I ask you that. Because the argument that we were getting from the Blairs and the Ken Clarks and the Financial Times and the big businesses was if we didn't join the euro, we'd lose hundreds of thousands of jobs and inward investment would collapse. The point I'm making, Sam, is that whatever economic predictions one or another side of an argument of an argument can make, they can in some cases both be wrong. Isn't the argument, Sam, that in democratic terms people voted to leave the European institutions, and don't they deserve to get that?
Yeah, they deserved full knowledge of what it would actually mean, and I don't think at the time of the referendum they had that full knowledge. I think it's becoming clearer now how bad things will become.
Well, Sam, as I say, I've heard these are exactly the same arguments I heard at the time of the euro. There's nothing new in these arguments. They were wrong about that. I believe they're wrong about this now. But Sam, also, and okay, WTO, there'll be tariffs, but under WTO rules, we'll be free to make our own trade deals anywhere we choose in the world, and to have our own legislation that is not tied to the rest of Europe. I mean, we could, Sam, become very much more competitive.
Quite compatible. It's quite possible that in 50, 60 years' time we might sort of regain some type of exporting type business. But the people that are living now, I think, are going to suffer greatly, and I think the poor people are going to suffer the most, and these are the ones that you're trying to help. And I don't know, I have a feeling that somewhere you might have a feeling that by now that, things aren't going quite the way they were.
Well, no. Things, and that's because we've got a government that's not delivering Brexit, Sam. They're trying to sort of steer this middle course of Brexit in name only, which effectively leaves none of us particularly happy with where we're actually being taken. Sam, I thank you for your call. I thank you for making your points. And Sam is full of economic doom and gloom if we leave the European Union, and it was important that we heard that point of view. Martin is another new caller from Tower Hamlets. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. So, do you think, under this government, we could be headed for a no deal?
Well, I think Liam Fox's announcement was more directed at the EU. For me, the biggest threat is about Article 50 being extended along with the transition period.
Yes.
And I think this is a major headache for most parties, isn't it? And I think if they could kick it into the long grass until after the next election, I think that would be a hell of a temptation for them, isn't it?
Well, that's my prediction, Martin. My prediction is that come the autumn, we'll make yet more concessions, we'll be humiliated further, but there will be a massive establishment attempt to say, time has now run out, and this, of course, suits Barney here beautifully. Time has now run out. We can't do anything before March the 29th. It's technically impossible. We must suspend Article 50. And that, I think, Martin, is going to be the big campaign of the autumn.
And I totally agree with that. And I think, everyone, Project Fear a lot of people are buying into Project Fear. Your last caller is obviously an example of that. But what's so wrong about WTO? Because most of our trade is outside of the EU, and we seem to manage quite well. So what's the problem?
I'm going to Southampton this afternoon, Martin. I tell you what, there'll be no shortage of containers coming into Southampton this afternoon from China. There'll be tens of thousands of them. And, hey, they're doing quite well, aren't they?
Exactly, and these EU markets, they're not going to walk away from us. They need our trade. You know, we're a valuable market to them. So that if they don't do it through the EU, they'll do it through WTO. We are a valuable market.
We are Treasure Island, Martin.
Exactly, and most of our trade is outside of Europe anyway, and we manage quite well. So I'm afraid this Project Fear, a lot of people are buying into this Project Fear, and it's very misleading, and I think politicians are being very dishonest. They want to kick this into the long grass because it's a problem for all of them. And
delay it. But Martin, your point that it would suit them all to kick it beyond the next general election is a very shrewd political observation. I thank you for it. Anthony on Facebook says, WTO would be a disaster because it means a hard border in Northern Ireland. Does it, Anthony? Why? Why can't we have trusted trader schemes? Why can't we ask people who are selling us goods from Northern Ireland just to register online what those goods are and to pay the appropriate tariff? Do we distrust the Dublin government so much? Do we think they're going to become international smugglers? I don't actually believe that. There is no need for a hard border. And by that you mean troops along the Irish border, the images that we remember from the Troubles. There's no need for any of that. Let's go to Steve in Maidenhead, another new caller to this show. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Nigel, how you doing?
Morning. I'm fine. I mean, a lot of people seem to be unconcerned by no deal, which says to me that when they get Project Fear, whether it's Mark Carney from the Bank of England or Peter Mandelson or whatever it is, they just don't believe anyone anymore.
Absolutely. I absolutely have no belief in anything. They've cried wolf so many times. So unfortunately, I mean, that Project Fear side of things for me, it's why bother? I mean, at the end of the day, they're just trying to fear. I spoke to a friend of mine about this a couple of days ago. The sad thing is, he's sort of fatigued by all this now. He's almost like, I can't be bothered with Brexit anymore. Which I wonder if that was the aim all along.
I think that is quite a tactic, isn't it? Just to grind us down with daily negative news stories, which is what we get from the Remain campaign, and hopefully people will say, hey, do you know what? This Brexit thing, forget about it.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm not going to. I said to him, look, get your mojo back. He's going on holiday, he's coming back, and then hopefully he's ready for the autumn. And the thing is that the reason I rang in was on the WTO side of things we talked about. I mean, if May holds her position and Barnier holds his position, we will end up in WTO because neither at the moment.
Yes. Well, Steve, whilst that's true, I just do not believe that's even a possibility with this cabinet, this Prime Minister and this Parliament.
Here's the thing, I've got no worries with WTO. There will be hassle in the short term. In the long term, it'll all settle down. This business will then adapt to the new reality and as business does. So I've got no issues with the WTO. There will be short-term pain, I would suggest, and hassle, but there we go. And if, as you say, then somebody will give, i.e., it's going to be Theresa May.
Us, Steve. Us.
Exactly.
We will cave. Sadly, we will surrender this autumn.
Sadly, Nigel, you are probably right.
I hope I'm wrong. I really, really, truly hope I'm wrong. Thank you, and thank you everybody for that. Now, Sir Vince Cable has held secret talks with a former aide to Tony Blair on the possibility of forming a new Lib-Lab alliance to counter Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn, with voters now beginning to turn away from Labour with the anti-Semitism row that never seems to end. Some of them are turning away from the Tories over Brexit. Do you think there is space for a new centrist party in British politics? If you think, yep, absolutely, people would lap it up, call 0345 6060 973. If you think, no, there's no room at all, text to 84850. Or maybe you remember the SDP and how that went. Did they succeed or did they fail? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Morning. Well, it happened a long time ago. The Labour Party under Michael Foot was seen to be veering way off to the left, and there seemed to be the need, the desire, for a new centre party, one that brought together a big chunk of the Labour Party and the old Liberal Party, which, of course, had suffered post the Jeremy Thorpe debacle. And sure enough, the Limehouse Declaration in 1981 set up the Social Democratic Party, the SDP. They became a very significant party in British politics, but they were unable to break the first-past-the-post electoral system. I personally know quite a bit about that issue too, though you could argue that the setting up of the SDP did actually lead to a big reform within the Labour Party, albeit after a bitter internal civil war, one that Kinnock had to fight and John Smith had to fight. But you could argue that Tony Blair came along as Prime Minister because the SDP had actually, in political terms, laid the foundation for virtually everything that was the Blair project. So it has happened before in relatively recent time. But the fact that this week Sir Vince Cable, leader of the Liberal Democrats, has held a meeting with Philip Collins, a Times writer and a former aide to Blair and a vicious critic of Jeremy Corbyn, is there the possibility now of a new centre party being formed in politics? And let's be honest, it has for Jeremy Corbyn been an even more miserable week than that had by Mrs May over the last few weeks. I mean, they're all in trouble in many ways. But this anti-Semitism row simply will not go away. The Labour Party will not accept the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of what anti-Semitism is. And even though Corbyn writes articles in The Guardian, I will root anti-Semites out of Labour, they do not speak for me, it doesn't seem to matter what Corbyn says, because with everything he says, a new story, a new revelation comes out about a meeting he was at or groups of people that he knows. And of course, his big problem is what he has described in the past, people like Hamas and Hezbollah as friends, and they have a very, very anti-Israel, if not anti-Semitic reason for being. Now, Tom Watson this morning, has spoken out in very, very strong terms. He really has said that shame is being brought upon the Labour Party, that the party needs to take a good, long, hard look at itself, or it will be unelectable. The other aspect to this is, of course, we can't get away from it, Brexit. There are people in this country who think we simply just should not leave the European Union, that anything must be done to reverse the Brexit result. So a new centre party would be one that did not accept the leadership of Corbyn, did not like the leftward direction of the Labour Party, let alone the allegations of anti-Semitism, but it also would be a party that believed in staying part of the European Union, and it would be headed up by people who wanted us to join the euro and probably ultimately would still want us at some point in time to join the euro. Is there space out there for this party? Well, I've always thought there isn't space, because it's always seemed to me that actually the Tory party are pretty centrist these days. That not massive differences on many social policies or economic policies even from the other parties. But I have to say that the trouble that Corbyn is in, the leftward drift, or not even a drift, is it? It's a bit more radical than that. But these allegations around Corbyn, I thought this would all come out in the general election last year. I couldn't believe he got through the election looking like a sort of youth cult figure. I always thought some of this stuff would come back to dog him. I didn't realise it would take so long. I do think, with the trouble Labour are in, there is some room for a centre party. I don't think it would be huge, but it would be a lot bigger than the Liberal Democrats are right now, as they consistently poll 6 to 8%. There's a chunk of Labour who would easily go for this party. The question is, would there be, as there were back in 1981, 4 senior cabinet figures who would make this step? I don't know. Tom is a new caller to this show, and he's calling from Crieff up in Perthshire. Tom, is there room for a new centre party?
Whether there is room for it or not, Nigel, and it's great to talk to you.
Good morning.
It is going to happen.
Is it?
It has to happen. Because the divisions within the Labour Party as we knew it, I think no longer exists. There has been a coup, and what we now call momentum, what we used to call militant, have taken over, effectively. And it suits them very well to have a purge of people so they can get rid of them, the moderate Labour folk, and actually I actually feel quite sorry for those people, because I cannot possibly vote for Jeremy Corbyn, whatever he says now. It doesn't matter if they change the definition on anti-Semitism.
We're too late.
I look at the man's political record. He is a man who has stood with terrorists and not stood for his own national anthem. That tells me everything I need to know.
Tom, why has it taken so long for this narrative to take hold? I thought this would happen last year. Why has it taken so long, do you think?
Because I think those people, and some of the group within the Conservatives, the Anna Soubry's and so on, who of course was STP, if I remember.
She was, absolutely. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So these people know, they understand politics very, very well, and they understand two things. That he who owns the name Conservative or Labour, it doesn't really matter. It's the proverbial pin the rosette on a donkey. And
it's the first past the post voting system, Tom, isn't it?
That is the other big element. So the new party, if it's going to survive, has to espouse first past the post. They can no longer argue for a referendum on the matter because we've been there and done that. So they will ultimately...
Although, Tom, it was
it'll be like a striking match.
It was very unsatisfactory referendum, though, wasn't it? Because for some reason, Nick Clegg agreed to a referendum on an electoral system you couldn't explain in one sentence, and that actually wasn't proportional in any way at all. It was preferential. It was bizarre, Tom.
And that Nick Clegg is a product of the EU explains a lot, don't you think?
Well, in many ways, it probably does.
I mean, typical EU nonsense. He came up with the most impenetrable, nonsensical system and expected people to believe it simply because he said it was a good idea.
Yeah, it was dreadful. I mean, I wanted electoral reform, Tom, and I did join that campaign. I even shared a platform with Eddie Izzard and people like that. But I have to say, Tom, it was a huge mistake. But maybe you're right. Maybe calling for electoral reform so shortly after a referendum on it is just not going to be the case. Tom, are you naturally a Labour supporter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a working class guy, Nigel. I have never been a member of any political party, and from my point of view, I'm calling you from Crieff in Perthshire. I'm Scottish by birth, okay? But I am in the comfortable position in many ways that I don't vote for anyone. I vote against the SNP.
Right, yeah.
So whoever in the various elections, be it council elections, Scottish Parliament, UK elections, and still the EU, God help us. I just look at the way the thing works and who is most likely to defeat the SNP, and I will vote for them. So
Crieff, and I remember I've campaigned in Crieff, a long time ago, 20 years ago, and I campaigned in Crieff because, I think it was 1995 or 6, because, more than 20 years ago, because there was the death of the Conservative Member of Parliament.
Correct.
For Crieff. What was his name? Sir Nick?
Nicky Fairbairn.
Fairbairn, that's right. He was a larger-than-life, hard-drinking, backbench Tory MP.
A gentleman of the tartan trews, if you recall.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way anyone like that would ever become a candidate for the Conservative Party, but he was a character. So, do you, Tom, given that that's a concern, so would you, as a working-class natural Labour supporter, would you vote Conservative then to stop the SNP?
Absolutely.
You would?
I voted Tory last time.
You did. Interesting. Very interesting, Tom. Thank you for your call. And Tom there saying, whether there's space or not for this centre party, he thinks it'll happen. He thinks Anna Soubry's going to be in it, Vince Cable's going to be in it, and who knows is going to be in it from, effectively, New Labour, as opposed to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, which is having a miserable week. Carl is calling from Cuddercott in Hertfordshire. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. Is there room for a new centre party, Carl?
Well, there is, but I would rather see another party, not a centre party from a split from, taken from each party. I'd like to see something new, something for the people, something for the country, that speak our language, that are not basically speaking for themselves.
And where would that party, Carl, stand on Brexit, for argument's sake?
Well, personally, we have to leave. It's nonsensical to stay, especially under what they're offering.
But then this party that's being discussed would be a very firm Remain party.
I I know, and that's basically where it has to stop now, because they're going to push it through. What we need a change of the two-tier politics system.
Well, I'd love to see that, Carl, too, but as I say, breaking the first-past-the-post system is very, very difficult, and people increasingly don't vote for the party they like, they vote for the party they dislike less than the other one who they think might win.
Well, it's true.
It's ghastly. You know, it is oh, no, I can't stand the Tories, but I hate Labour even more, or vice versa. That's what we're stuck with. Carl, I thank you. And picking up on Carl's point, there is now a little bit of room for a new centre party. I don't think it's huge, but there is a bit of room for it. Where there could be a huge amount of room is on the centre-right of British politics. If we finish up with a hugely fudged Brexit, you know, a party, and of course it would be called populist, but a party that really believed in Brexit and wanted to even talk about immigration rather than brush it under the carpet and say it's too difficult to talk about such things, particularly on a Sunday morning, don't you know, then I think actually that's where the room is. The room may well be on the centre-right. There is some room in the centre, but I don't believe it's all that great. That's my view. Tell me I'm right. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 11:15. Well, as Vince Cable meets a senior Blair aide, former Blair aide, I'm asking, is there room for a new centre party? Chris says to me on SMS, there's no room for a party with Cable and Blair. It wouldn't be democratic. These people don't respect democratic decisions. And Chris, you're quite right to raise the name of Blair, and we could have raised Nick Clegg's name as well. All of these people are talking and floating about the possibility of a new political party. One that is opposed to Brexit, but equally one that is opposed to the direction Corbyn has taken the Labour Party in, particularly during the depths of this anti-Semitism row, which Tom Watson warns Labour supporters could basically make them unelectable. And a very interesting article, I think, this morning in The Observer by Fiona Miller. She, former advisor to Sherry Blair, incidentally, she's the wife of Alistair Campbell, who will have to get back on this Sunday morning programme for a good head-to-head on Brexit before too long, because that's always entertaining. But Fiona Miller writes, you know, for 40 years I've stayed with the party, dark days and all, why I'm now on the brink of leaving. So she's sat in the Labour Party even during the awful years of the 1980s, you know, when the hard left-wing group did their best to take the Labour Party over. They certainly poisoned the Labour Party. And ever look at those clips of Neil Kinnock, you know, getting up at the party conference and being booed by his own people. It was pretty vicious, nasty stuff. She stayed through all of that, but she wants a party that is unequivocally anti-Brexit, and she's really worried, you know, about the anti-Semitism row that simply won't ever go away. What she's almost saying, if you read between the lines, is we fought the extremists back in the 1980s within Labour, but now the extremists are effectively running the Labour Party. So interesting that somebody of that seniority is hinting they could walk away from this Labour Party. I think there is some room for that new party. I don't think it's huge. I think if Brexit continues on its current course, there'll be even bigger room. And Stuart Jackson earlier said, you know, what happens if a lot of Conservatives go back to a rejuvenated UKIP? It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. Is there room? Nigel, the country is sick to death of the mainstream parties, says Tom in Basingstoke. Well, you know, a new centre party will be formed to win the next election, and Article 50 will be extended, says Bill from Chipping Norton. Well, Article 50, let's hope it's not. But Article 50 could be extended even without a new centre party being formed. That would just give them perhaps a little bit more room, a little bit more space. James is a new caller from Cardiff. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. So is there room, is there space for this new centre party?
Nigel, there's a space for a new party which I think should really take over from UKIP. Because you had a foundation of, 4 million in the last big election that we had good votes from.
Yeah.
You will now have a disenchanted vote of 17 million plus whatever.
Uh-huh.
So this time round, and I'd have to say it'd have a new party because UKIP has lost their gloss, really. They've lost the whole plot from that point of view. But you'd have to get into politics now rather than sort of go into UKIP. So I think you're the guy to lead it, and you'll have a massive following. And because the numbers are there, I think, for a new party, I think the numbers are there, and it just needs to be grabbed. And you talked about coming back into politics. I think now is the time to do it.
James, UKIP were up in the opinion polls. You know, they were up from 3% to 8% a couple of weeks ago. They're back to 6%, I think. But you know, there is an uptick in UKIP support, particularly since the Chequers deal. But James, you know, my own position is I've always said I don't want to come back into frontline politics. I did that for years and years and years. It's a pretty miserable place to be. Most of it's awful, James, but it's necessary. But if Brexit continues to fail, I will get back to campaigning. That's certainly true. In terms of a new party, I do agree with you that there's more room for, you know, a UKIP type party that is pro-Brexit, pro-border controls. I think there's more room for that than there is a centre party. But do you think, James, and a slightly separate tack, but back to what we're supposed to be talking about, do you think there is room for Cable, for Blair, for Clegg, for others, maybe even Fiona Miller, to have this new centrist party?
I don't think there's any room for it. I mean, they'll fantasise about having a new party that'll do something for them, but it won't. It'll just be another party that is saying the same old things. It's really the Lib Dems, etc., under a new face, a new guise, but it'll do nothing at all from that point of view. So if I was there, I'd say bring it on and let's fight it that way.
Yeah.
But, you know, the only way to reverse or to get back on track with Brexit is for UKIP, or a party like UKIP, as I've said, to go up in the polls, and for the Tories to go down to, say, 28, 29, 27, and that would then scare the MPs. And they'd start changing their minds about what to vote for and how to vote for it.
They do need scaring, James, to get change. Thank you very much indeed for your observations and your call. Great text here. There is already a soft-left, pro-Remain centrist party, Theresa May's Conservatives. Thank you very much. Steve on Facebook says, a party that does what it says on the tin would be good. Yeah, and let me just say this to you folks, and some of you are going to hate this, some are going to love this. Isn't it interesting? If you look around the world at leaders, you know, Macron's current support level in France is 36%. Angela Merkel's current support level is 33%. Theresa May's current support level is about 24%. Donald Trump's current support level is just slightly shy of 51%. And however much he's mocked and parodied and hated and loathed by some, he's doing well. And the reason is, Steve, he's doing what he said on the tin. He promised a series of things he would do. He's doing them. Some people love it, some people hate it. But they can't argue that he's not keeping faith with his own voters. And I think that, perhaps, is one of the things here that has led to this increasing disconnect between ordinary folk and the so-called mainstream political parties. There's already a centrist it's more serious, this one. There's already a centrist pro-Euro, pro-EU party, and Vince Cable leads it. The Lib Dems, it's a shame they messed it up. Well, they did, of course, have a great rise, but things did go badly wrong once they got into that coalition government. But the point is, I think Jiwa, who sent me that message, that what Cable could do here is to try to reshape the centre of politics, to try and get something that Soubry can join, try and get something that some senior Labour people can join. I think there is some space for it. I really, really do. Because I don't think that Corbyn's problems are going away in a hurry. But I also see with the Labour membership, his position right now is pretty much impregnable. Simon on Facebook says, would you join the Conservatives if they, 1, offered you a job, and 2, could help with Brexit? If they offered me a job, Simon, well, they've offered me safe seats before, but I've turned them down on the basis the party did not stand for the things that I believed in. If I was to help them with Brexit in any way at all, I'd be better doing it not as a member of the Conservative Party, I think, in many, many ways. I certainly wouldn't. I couldn't be bribed by them, let's put it like that. And Simon, frankly, the prospects of this Conservative Party wanting anything to do with me under Mrs May's leadership are, to be frank, pretty remote. Nick is calling from Slough. Good morning, Nick.
Hi, Nigel. First time speaking to you, fella.
Well, very pleased to have you on the line, Nick. Is there, could Vince Cable, is he about to break the mould of British politics?
No, he certainly is not. I really don't think there's any need or space for any new parties. I mean, a serious question, Nigel. How many parties are already out there? How many have been formed over the last decade?
Oh, loads.
I really think that there's plenty to choose from. Now, obviously, I'm biased in what I'm about to say, but I think UKIP are the only party that this country needs, especially to get what the 17.4 million people voted for in June 2016. However, Nigel, you're not going to like this. Now, I've heard you say that you'll come back and lead UKIP if Brexit
No. Nick, can we please? This is how we get these ridiculous stories in Sunday newspapers. What I've said is that the UKIP leadership is up for grabs at the end of March next year. That's the time when Gerard Batten's position is open to challenge. And I've said if Brexit continues on this sellout course, I would seriously consider putting my name in the ring. That's all I've said, Nick.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of all UKIPers, Nigel, but I can speak on behalf of the ones that I know, and they don't want you to, and you'll come back anywhere near UKIP. Now, let me remind you, you're the reason I started getting involved in politics 10 years ago, okay?
Yeah.
So you said, and I'm sure you did, you said you'd come back to frontline politics if any backtracking. There's been backtracking ever since the vote was cast. You weren't bothered. As far as I'm concerned, you were too busy in America, then on LBC. You then, this is your biggest mistake, Nigel, you then went on that left-leaning anti-Brexit show, The Right Stuff, and said, whether it was tongue-in-cheek, you said, we may need another vote to shut the likes up of Tony Blair, Nick Clegg.
Well, we may well, Nick, because they may force a second referendum upon us.
The Remainers were smiling ear to ear when they heard you say that. The poster boy for Brexit, the actual epitome of Brexit, and they heard you say that, and they were just smiling ear to ear. You made their day, their year, their life. You really didn't need to say that.
Nick, I was trying to alert people to the fact that a major campaign for a second referendum was on the horizon. And now we know that George Soros is funding it. I wasn't wrong, was I?
No, you weren't. But look, like I said,
Thank you.
You had plenty of chances to try and come back and try and work your magic with UKIP and get what the 17.4 million people voted for. And I just think you're far too busy in the US of A and now on LBC. And I just think you're...
Well, Nick, you're right. I haven't given my all to this. I only gave UKIP 25 years of my life. I should have given it a lot more, clearly. Nick, UKIP can carry on its current course, and it may well do extraordinary things. For my own part, I'm very worried about backtracking on Brexit. It's not all over yet. Something miraculous may well happen. Nick, I thank you for your call. Let's... reflect on what Nick said there. He thinks UKIP is the party, that it's got the right leader in the shape of Gerard Batten, and that is more likely to transform the political scene than anything Vince Cable is doing with Labour. Let's reflect and think about that. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's now 11:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. The other subject, of course, that is really dominating everyone's conversation isn't Brexit woes or whether there's going to be a new centre back. What's really dominating is, of course, the weather. I just had a few days in Cornwall. It was gorgeous down there. I've never seen so many people in the sea in this country, and it just seems to go on and on and on. By my calculations, we're in about week 11, I think, of really remarkable summer weather. Meanwhile, of course, on parts of southern Europe, we're reaching temperatures that are actually very, very serious and a threat, a genuine threat. I always poo-poo when the government here puts out amber warnings and red warnings, but I think actually the situation in parts of Europe is actually pretty serious. Helping us through all of this is, of course, legendary weatherman John Ketley. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning, Nigel.
So things in Europe pretty serious, yeah?
Very, very hot indeed, it has to be said. It's been getting hotter as time has gone by this summer. You've got to remember that as the summer goes along, it dries out, it completely dries out, it's tinder dry everywhere, so there's no moisture to evaporate, which means to say that the temperatures continue to rise and lift up the air temperature. So at the moment, I'm just looking on today's values. Yesterday we got 45 in the south of Spain, Seville, that sort of area.
Wow.
Today it's currently 39 in Turkey. It's been very hot in Turkey as well, it has to be said, but I think everybody's looking now at Spain and Portugal as being the hot spots today, and it's already 35, 36 degrees even in the Balearic Islands, that's Ibiza and Mallorca and Minorca, which is very unusual. The highest temperature so far in Ibiza this year was 30th of June when it got to 35, 36. That will be beaten today by the looks of things, but the higher temperatures will be down in the south of Spain and Portugal, so it is threatening this highest ever of about 47, 48 degrees, something like that.
And they're extraordinary, sort of about 115, 120 in
something like that, and counting,
Fahrenheit.
Yes.
Yeah. I know, absolutely. Is it the similar weather phenomenon in Spain and Portugal that we're getting in this country?
Well, it is a very stationary situation we've got this year. You know, the jet stream is the one that it really controls the weather across the whole of the northern hemisphere. They've got a jet stream in the south as well, southern hemisphere, but ours is the northern jet stream, which is pushed right up towards the Arctic Circle, which we've talked about recently, Nigel. So it does mean to say that things have become very stagnant, and all the warm air has pumped way north into northern latitudes, and there's not a lot changing things at the moment. But I have to tell you that things are about to change, and there will be a big change as we go through the week.
Right, we're all ears, John. Tell us.
Well, I think eventually we're going to see even cooler weather coming down into southern Spain. So the jet stream will start to flex its muscles. It's going to move across central and northern Europe a little bit more from west to east. So that means to say we're going to allow much cooler, more changeable conditions to come into the UK first of all. And even down in Cordoba and Seville, where it will reach this 45, 46 today, it could be down at 34 degrees in about 9 days' time. I wonder what that'll feel like after 47.
Yeah.
They'll be putting the coats on, won't they?
Well, equally here, of course. Here, of course. I mean, so are you saying that the barbecue summer is coming to an end?
I'm saying at the moment, Nigel, that things are about to change. We're going to see a dip in temperature from about Tuesday onwards, and temperatures will plummet down to about, say 18 to 23 for the second half of the week.
Hang on. That's just about normal then, isn't it?
So that's about normal, yeah. What we've had so far this summer has been quite extreme, and it is going to be certainly a memorable summer, which is the first memorable summer going on for 2 or 3 months since 2006 and 2003 before that. So we've had some pretty lousy summers, it has to be said. We've had short spells, week or two, of hot weather and consecutive summers since 2010. But this is the longest spell of fine weather with drought conditions across many parts of the country.
And good business for weathermen like John Ketley.
Keep that phone ringing.
Absolutely. John, thank you very much. Well, John Ketley there saying it is going to change in 8 or 9 days' time, and it will start to become a bit cooler. But boy, it has been a remarkable spell of weather. I hope many of you have got the chance to be out there and to enjoy it. Back to the centre party in British politics. Is there space for it or not? I think there's some. Matt is a new caller from Stuttgart in Germany. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, I think personally that there isn't any room for any centrist party, because it would be an anti-Brexit party for the political demagogues like Clegg and Soubry, and we rejected their vision 2 years ago. And it would be in favour of a soft Brexit or overturning the referendum.
Yes.
And to be quite honest, it's going to be a centrist party. It just sounds a bit like Brexit dysfunction to me. I mean, what's the point in leaving if we can't sign up for our own free trade deals and just deregulate?
Oh, no, Matt,
red tape and all that.
I'm with you on that, but what could create the space for it? I mean, for example, I've got Mark here on Twitter saying to me, the next general election will be fought on a Leave or Remain manifesto. Now, if Article 50 goes through, right, and we leave, even if we leave badly, but we leave on March the 29th, the next general election will not have the Leave or Remain option, because we will actually have left. And any party that says we should rejoin and have another referendum, it just isn't going to go very far. But it could be, Matt, that if Article 50 gets suspended, there could just be space for this party, couldn't there?
I don't think so, because if you think about it, I mean, it's the same system as America, if you like. You've got to be either on the Conservatives or Labour at the end of the day, because any third party is just going to get washed out by third party posters. There's no question of that. I mean, the Liberal Democrats peaked in 2010 when they were in coalition with the Conservatives, because everyone was disenfranchised with, Gordon Brown and the financial crisis. But it's tough. It's tough to say.
Hey, Matt,
we're very well for one, but I doubt
you are talking, Matt.
Very well for them.
You are talking to the one person in the history of the British electoral system who got the most votes for the lowest return. So I know all about the first past the post system. I really, really do. Okay, Matt, thank you. And Matt thinks there isn't too much room for them. Look, I'm not saying it's going to be a huge political party, but it could. Who's to say? The Lib Dems, let's say they're on 7 or 8% now. I think if they were to get other people in with them, with a new sort of rebranded centre party, they might get to 15, 17%. I don't see them going up to 25, 30%. That's the point that I'm making. There is some room, but not much. But what do you do? I mean, tell me, if you're listening to this and you're a Blairite Labour voter, you've got Jeremy Corbyn, a leader, who you think has taken the party not just on a leftward direction, but perhaps in a rather dark direction in terms of some of the people and friends around him. You don't like Brexit. What do? Do you vote for Corbyn's Labour Party next time round? Or do you hope for some kind of accommodation and deal with Vince Cable? I don't know. Brian is a new caller from Hornchurch in Essex. Good morning, Brian.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So is there space for this new centre party?
Well, I can only assume that they're trying to hoover up the Remain votes, and obviously further down the line, they won't be there, so I don't think it'll last for long, personally.
OK, so you're confident, Brian, that Article 50 will happen, we will leave next March?
No, I'm not confident, really, because I think they'll try to extend it. This is the plan. But can I just say, the last general election we had, I think we're looking at it the wrong way, because Theresa May was expecting to get a huge majority. Now, just imagine if she had got that majority, she'd been railroading through everything that she wants to do, and we wouldn't have any way of stopping her.
No, well, but I mean, who's stopping her anyway?
Well, we're trying to stop her doing it, but there's no, in Parliament, there's no help to leave, is there?
Brian, to me, I'm just astonished that we've reached the summer recess where they're still in position. I really am astonished, and particularly given Labour's problems. If there was a time for the Tory party to have a quick leadership election, it would be right now during this month of August, and they haven't had the bottle to do it. Brian, I thank you for your call. I'm going to move on to Bill, a new caller from Southampton. Hello there.
Oh, hello there, Nigel.
So, is there room for this party? Can it succeed?
Absolutely not.
Right, go on.
No, it's been tried, on a number of occasions, and as you, described a bit earlier on, the Labour Party had that split when David Owen and Vince Cable moved out to form the SDLP.
You mean Roy Jenkins?
Collapsed, and now what we're left now is the Liberal Party. No, I don't think that because of the first past the post system in this country, it just cannot succeed. I hope they give it a go, but it's not going to work. The other side of this is that if you look at the voting pattern in the country, 17.5 million people in this country voted to leave the EU.
Yep.
Now, where are these? Where's this new party going to pick its votes up from? If it's one of its main manifesto pledges is it's going to be a party that wants to take us out of the EU. I think it's absolutely doomed to failure.
Well, it wants, it wants to stop us leaving. Bill, there's much more room for a pro-Brexit party and the things Brexit campaigners campaigned on. There's much more room for that than there is for a centrist pro-EU party if the Conservatives carry on with their current course, and Labour too, because they're all supporting simply Brexit in name only. Nigel, there is room for a sensible, balanced, socially liberal and inclusive pro-Brexit, pro-democracy, pro-equality party. That's what we need, says David in Ascot. So David thinks there is room. There's some room, David, but I don't think there's really very much. That's my view. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 11:45. Before we get back to whether there's room for a centre party, I want to say this. I just can't believe these constant attempts to rewrite history, to take our own moral position today and to apply it by going back to past historical figures. And I say that because Cambridge University have just removed a bust and a portrait of Jan Smuts. Who, you ask? Well, he did at one point become the Prime Minister of South Africa, but he was crucially one of the leaders of the Boers against the British back at the turn of the century. He, in the end, negotiated a peace settlement with the British. He then fought with the British in 2 world wars. In fact, in World War II, he was the person in the world closest to Winston Churchill. They were pretty much inseparable for much of the war. And he is a remarkable historical figure, Smuts. He really is. There's a statue of him in Parliament Square. He's not someone that gets talked about very much, but boy, you look at those wartime pictures, look at the big conferences that Churchill went to, who was with him, who was his confidant during the bad times as well as the good times. It was Jan Smuts. And yes, he did lead a country that was white rule And Smuts, of course, as Prime Minister, supported that. But he wasn't one of those that supported racial segregation. He wasn't, like many who came after him, and supported a policy of apartheid. Certainly not, even by his own, but even by the standards of the time. He was not an extreme person. And I think, actually, what we ought to say is to Cambridge University, rather than Mr. Smuts being a figure of oppression, without people like Smuts, we wouldn't have beaten totalitarianism, we wouldn't have beaten the Nazis, and where would we all be? Can't keep rewriting history, folks. Otherwise, Washington, D.C., George Washington kept slaves. They worked for him on his plantations. Are we to rewrite, and rename our towns, our villages? We simply can't do it. We may not approve of the way things were done in the olden days, but that is how they were. Our job is to make tomorrow better, not to try and rewrite yesterday. That's my view. Right, back to British politics. Nigel, if you're not going to lead UKIP, could you sign up for Tottenham and help us win the league? Thank you, Colin. You said you wouldn't be part of a May government, but what about a Boris or a Jacob one? Sean, I don't see myself being part of any government, all right, but I would like to see a Conservative leader, and maybe even a Labour leader, that generally wanted to push for Brexit and the advantages, both democratic and economic, that we could get from it. Fred is a new caller from Matlock in Derbyshire. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning, Nigel.
So Vince Cable is looking to up the game of the centrists in British politics and the pro-Remainers. Can he do it?
Quick observation. Look at Cable's support in the country, and anything Blairite's toxic. I can't see. I honestly think that their vision is being bounced back from the Westminster boundary. Then it's certainly not looking in the country.
No, but Fred, there must be a lot of people who voted for Blair in 3 elections, and may have voted since 2 for the Labour Party, who look at Corbyn and say, we can't vote for this guy.
Absolutely. I'm a small businessman. I have been for 40 years. You only get 2 for manslaughter, by the way.
I know. Tough running your own business. I know, I've been there.
Well, we're getting there. I've never been busier since the Brexit vote. I'm not going to read too much into that because it'll get thrown back in my face. But at the end of the day, we need a party that does what it says it's going to do. And Theresa May's always been under suspicion, and now she's just showing her true colours. What we do need is people to take their courage in hand and come forward. As you say yourself, there's never a better time for an election for their leadership.
Absolutely, but they've all blinked, Fred. None of them have had the guts. All right, so basically, you don't really think there's much space at all for a pro-Remain party?
No, absolutely not.
All right,
there's no desire in the country that we voted for that, and that's that.
OK, Fred, thank you. Very down-to-earth. Fred says we voted for it, that's that. Well, if only it was, in some cases. This new party will be a total flop, I get, by text. Think there really is scope for a new centrist party, although we have no expectation of logical candidates being bold enough to act, says Edward. Well, Edward, in a sense, it's the same problem, isn't it? I've just been critical of Conservatives who weren't prepared to wield the knife, to get rid of May, to use August, to get the party back on track and get Brexit back with a fresh approach. But similarly, there's nobody, there's Fiona Miller suggesting she might leave, Tony Blair seemed to be talking about a new centre party, but perhaps without, as Fred just mentioned, that much public support for Tony Blair out there still in the country. Are there senior Labour figures who would jump ship and work with Cable to form something new? With the first past the post electoral system, very difficult to see it. So I'm going to go on making the argument. There is some space, but there isn't very much for a new centre party. Philip is calling from Bridgewater. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you today? Okay?
I'm okay. So is there room for Mr. Cable and his gang, or is it just the talk of Notting Hill dinner parties? Is it just the Liberal elite that think there's room for this and it's not so out in the country?
I don't think Vince Cable or any of the Blair or any of those people have got a hope in hell. They've had their chance. People can, he had the nickname of Teflon Tony when he was in power because he obviously everything slipped off of him. But at the end of the day, I don't think either of these two parties at the moment I think the turnout, if you had another election on these two parties, would be very, very low.
Yeah.
People are just fed up, Nigel. I mean, I've been a UKIPper for quite a few years, and I'm just fed up with all the jargon that's going on at the moment. There's no common sense out there, and UKIP was always a common sense party, as far as I'm concerned. And the fact is this: what is needed now is a party to come from behind and take both of these parties to toe. Neither of them stand a chance at the moment. There's so much disillusion. Everyone you talk to are fed up, really fed up, with Brexit and everything else to do with the parties that we've got now. They've been lying. I mean, Theresa May is lying all the way through. When she stood outside number 10, when she took the job.
Do you really think she's lying, Philip?
Oh, my God. I turned to my wife and I said, she's lying. When she said Brexit means Brexit and I'm going to take us out of Europe, I totally disagree.
Are you always, Philip?
Philip,
are you always this distrustful of British Prime Ministers?
No. I mean, you mentioned Churchill just now. He's a fantastic guy. I mean, I've got a lot of time for some of the Prime Ministers we've had, but certainly not Theresa May. She's by far the worst Prime Minister we've ever had.
I agree. Philip,
You cannot trust her, no.
Name one good quality about Theresa May. Come on, Philip, it's Sunday. Be charitable.
God, well, she's the daughter of a vicar, I suppose. That's the only thing I can think of.
And Philip, finally, you talked about disenchantment with the two parties, about turnout maybe being a lot lower, and I do agree with that. You were a UKIP supporter. How do you feel UKIP's doing now?
I feel, well, I'm glad to see we've popped back up to about 6-8%. I honestly believe, and I know Mr. Batten's not going to like hearing this, but I believe that if you were in front of us now, I honestly believe now there is a big future for UKIP right now. I honestly believe that because people are fed up.
Philip, thank you. Thank you for the call. Philip thinks there's a big hope for UKIP. Well, I think there possibly is. Depends how Brexit finishes up. Depends whether UKIP can go through the internal reforms that it clearly needs to go through. This new party will be a total flop, I am told. What does Ian in Morecambe in Lancashire think?
Good morning.
Good morning to
Nigel.
you. Good morning.
A couple of points for you to consider. One of them slightly aside. I feel quite smug and self-satisfied this morning that Peake, Corbyn, and it's a quick aside this, I'll move on to Vince Cable very, very quickly.
Sure.
I'm very, very, very self-satisfied that he's actually peaked, and I don't think he can come back. I do actually believe now he's a busted flush.
The gloss has gone, Ian, hasn't it?
I think it's gone. It's the older dad.
No more Glastonbury. No more the cheering adulation.
No, Nigel, certainly not. And you know, there's an older adage: you can't uncook a cooked egg. And even if
that's a very Lancashire expression, isn't it?
even if he had 4 aces left in his hand, they'd all be redundant now. Because you just can't bring yourself anyway.
Now you've made that point. I've let you enjoy yourself. Now.
Thanks. I am really enjoying myself this morning.
Now let's get back to the point.
Yes, let's look about dysfunctional governments in the UK, and they all are, all 6 of them, from north to south and divide east and west. Now the worst 2 at the moment that are the big 2: Labour, Conservative, going nowhere, totally dysfunctional. It's embarrassing for the pair of them. Now then, are you telling me that you could separate some parts of the Liberal Democrats and the probably slightly left of centre ex-Tony Blair politicians and bring anything truly about? All you're doing is bringing extra dysfunction on top of what is...
But what I'm arguing, Ian...
Dysfunction.
But what I'm arguing, Ian, is there are millions of people out there who voted for Blair, who like Blair's policies, who are, in fact, social democrats in many ways, and who are looking at this anti-Semitism row that Corbyn appears to be incapable of ending, and are saying to themselves, what do we do? Surely with all those millions of people, and with the fact that the Liberal Democrats exist, and they're there on 7 or 8%, surely there is some potential for a coming together.
What about first past the post with this ridiculous idea when it didn't work in the Michael Foot area? era with when the Lib Dems came together. They could not actually manage to do anything.
No, they couldn't.
Post.
Ian, you're right. The biggest barrier to all of this, the biggest barrier to any genuine change in British politics is the first past the post system. Thank you very much indeed to you, Ian, and to all of you this morning. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. At 3 this afternoon, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.